The key to high performance. Every process owner should be responsible for tracking and trending process performance and process waste on a regular basis, and for using that information to improve those processes. Who are your process owners? How do they spend their time and money each day? How do your process owners reinforce systems to drive current culture? How do they change systems to shift culture spin and speed? If I could suggest one change to significantly increase the likelihood that your performance improvement initiative would succeed, what would it be? Over recent years, I've finally become able to provide that answer after giving the question much thought as it related to my own past successes, failures, and learnings. That one recommendation is provided above, but it's not representative of what exists in most organizations today. Every process owner should be responsible for tracking and trending process performance and process waste on a regular basis, and for using that information to improve those processes. I would suspect that if you ask the leaders at the top or even in the middle of an organization if they currently expect all of their process owners to meet this singular expectation, they would probably tell you that they do this already. If they are willing to honestly consider the 3 additional questions I've provided, however, they'll have to admit that only a select group of process owners in their company are actually expected to monitor and improve their processes in this manner. In many organizations, these types of activities are relegated to the quality, safety, and industrial engineering departments instead of being an expectation of all process owners. By the way, I consider every formal leader to be the owner of at least one process. At the higher levels in an organization, these processes are typically of a project development, decision-making, meeting leadership, or planning nature. These higher-level executives regularly lead meetings, they regularly work on projects, and repeated planning is a central part of their jobs. The steps they use to execute these longer cycle processes are nonetheless repeatable and measurable, and they also contain some degree, and often a lot, of waste. Additionally, it's not unreasonable to expect decision speed, cost, and accuracy to be measured, trended, and improved over time. Decisions are one of the key services leaders provide. Why should your process improvement expectations vary by organizational level if all work is a process? If all work is a process, each formal leader owns at least one process. Who needs to change? Every process owner must spend more than 60% of their time with their people. Track and trend key process metrics daily. Know where key process hazards, errors, and defects exist. Keep a running list of possible improvements. Eliminate existing job waste to make time for new tasks. Should personal change be optional? This list of 5 leader or process owner expectations represents what I personally would expect and practice if I were the person in charge. They are both based on my experience, successful and unsuccessful, with sustaining process improvement efforts and what I've seen high-performance organizations expect of their process owners at any level in the organization. You need to decide what is reasonable to expect of your own leaders, what rate of change it makes sense to expect, and what degree of success you will have in getting these expectations implemented. The degree to which a process improvement effort of any type can be sustained is highly dependent on the degree that you are able to allow personal change to be optional. If you only expect a certain percentage, a small percentage, of people to follow these expectations, in other words, if you allow process improvement to be optional, then you'll have a relatively lower chance of sustaining your improvement initiative. Build process improvement expectations into each process owner's job description and compensation plan, however, and your probability for sustained success will skyrocket. One might wonder why I consider it so important to spend so much time with your people. To begin with, keep in mind that I consider your people to be both your internal and your external customers. If you don't know what your customers expect, how can you ensure that your processes are performing in a manner that meets those expectations? That said, I also know that many leaders spend 20% or less of their work time with their internal and/or external customers. Job design, how we learn and satisfy customers, it's hard to find time for that. But that's the key to sustained process excellence. We have to change our jobs to give us more time with our internal and external customers. In addition to adding a better understanding of what your customers expect, spending time with them also gives you as a leader the opportunity to learn about process waste and possible process improvements that can be made to minimize that waste. Spending time with your internal customers allows you as a leader to provide coaching, communicate changes, communicate direction, listen to ideas, and most importantly, regularly recognize them for the improvements that they've made. Every interaction with an internal customer is a chance to teach and learn. Comparing leadership approaches. Effective leadership is needed for any organization to attain process excellence levels, let alone sustain them. Additionally, the number of effective leaders in a given organization cannot be limited to just a few work groups or to certain organizational levels. This will only give you pockets of excellence. Sound familiar? Sustained process excellence happens when a consistent, high-quality level of process-focused leadership exists throughout the organization. While such a level of leadership excellence might sound difficult to attain, it is possible if the organization's leadership development process is well-defined, effective, well-deployed, and consistently improved from year to year. This is not the case in most organizations. Leadership behavior effectiveness is rarely measured, and when it is, systematic approaches for improving leadership behavior are not in place. Leadership competency assessment is often based only on references and resume contents. Few fact-based mechanisms exist for actually measuring leadership effectiveness on the job. In general, leadership effectiveness is gauged by looking at the performance levels of the people the leader is responsible for, instead of looking at the direct contributions each leader makes towards improving those processes they own. Leaders spend time executing processes daily, just like everyone else. How well do they execute those processes? How successful have they been in improving those processes over time? How do you measure leadership effectiveness in your organization? Do you make efforts to improve those effectiveness measures over time? And are they designed in a manner that actually assess true individual leadership competence and contribution? How well defined is your leadership development process? And how do you systematically review and improve that process over time? Answering these key questions will help you identify areas that both need improvement and are holding back your efforts to achieve and sustain process excellence from a leadership systems perspective. The leadership development process. The leadership development process is perhaps one of the most important and least improved processes in any organization. What is the case where you work? Is your leadership development process clearly defined? Are efforts made on at least an annual basis to identify areas where leadership development process improvement is needed and to build these needed improvements into your annual plans? Can you define changes that have been made to your leadership development process over the past 3 to 5 years? Can you gauge the degree to which these changes have been effective? Most organizations struggle to answer yes to at least one, let alone all of these questions. The typical leadership development process used by most organizations is pretty basic and rarely measured and improved over time. This standard process usually consists of a performance appraisal, the definition of very general areas where improvement is needed, and the listing of a course or two that needs to be taken to help address the current performance challenges. Little coordination exists between the plans that are developed for the different leaders who participate in this process, and some leaders are totally left out of it. Leadership effectiveness is normally measured by looking at the results that the leader's people produce, as opposed to evaluating each leader on how they actually spend their own time, how they spend their own money and emotion at work, how they improve systems they're responsible for. In the above example, leaders are measured using peer feedback and personal process-based results. This leadership development process is not complex, but its design does address many of the missing features found in a typical leadership development process. The approaches that are part of the 4 phases of this process focus on the processes each leader is responsible for, instead of being based on processes that process owners who report to the leader might own. In high-performance organizations, the same leadership development process, as well as the approaches that are part of that process, are consistently used throughout the organization, across all organizational levels and departments.